Hi folks, I'm Shamus from Outdoors Inspiration. This is my German Shepherd, Petra, and today we're going to have a little look at navigation. Today, England's currently in lockdown, so it'd be prudent that I pointed out that I am taking my daily exercise whilst producing this video, and I've walked from my house, from the front door, so there's no unnecessary travel involved, and I'm not hanging about. So the map I'm going to be using today is an Ordnance Survey OL 28. That's the Explorer Series Outdoor Leisure 28. That's the map for Dartmoor. It's a 1 in 25,000 scale map. Other cartographers and scales of map are also available. I'm not going to go into the ins and outs of projections. I mean, we could do that, Mercator, transverse Mercator, nomic projections, but to be honest with you, there are far better websites that will explain that for you if that's your bag and that's what you want to know. And I'm not going to show you how to derive a 6 or 8 figure grid reference. There are some outstanding websites that can demonstrate that really well, predominantly the Ordnance Survey website and their education page. I will put a link to that in the description below. That's a really good point of reference if you want to start out with a map and understand what the Ordnance Survey grid is. But I will follow this up with further hints, tips and tricks. We'll do a night session perhaps and look at night navigation, and I will bolster this with more information. This is a bit of a taster and some bite-sized chunks. Bear with me, let's see how it goes. Good girl, come on in. So I started off by saying that this map was a 1 in 25,000 scale. I'll just put that in real terms for you. So that means every 25 metres on the ground is represented by 1 millimetre on the map. Now that presents the map maker with a bit of a problem, because there's many features on the ground that may occur within that 25 metres, and they can't include everything. So here's a top tip. Number 1. If it's on the ground, it may not necessarily be on the map. Now, a really good example of that is perhaps a depression or a raise in altitude of less than 10 metres. If your contours are at 10 metre intervals, and a contour on a map is the brown line that represents areas of equal altitude, if they're at 10 metre intervals and gaps on the map, and there's a depression in the ground that's only, shall we say, 9.9 metres deep, it won't necessarily be represented on the map. So the map makers tend to include as many features as they can to make the map a realistic representation of what's on the ground, and by adding features, in the case of an outdoor leisure map, that are useful to the hill walker and hiker. What's on the map is very likely to be on the ground. So I'm looking for this point here, which is marked as a cairn. I know what a cairn looks like. It's a big pile of rocks. You get it on the summit of a mountain. The map says I've got it here somewhere. There are piles of rocks. Let's have a look. So this is actually our cairn, and this is a prehistoric cairn ring. It's marked as a cairn on the map. It's actually a curbed ring which surrounded a Bronze Age burial. It is probably 4,000 years old. There is no cairn associated with it, just the ring. Other things that may not be apparent straight away are things like linear features such as walls or fences. They may have been there for, I don't know, a century and they've been removed. But there's generally some sort of evidence on the ground that they've been there. And I don't know if you can make it out, but where Petra is right now is a slightly raised lump in the ground, a very longitudinal line in the ground. It runs up here, and that's actually marked on the map as a wall, as part of the Bronze Age settlement. Like I said, sometimes things are marked on a map, but you may not recognise them for what they are immediately. I prefer Ordnance Survey, Outdoor Leisure, 1 in 25,000 scale maps. BMC produce maps in 1 in 40,000 scale, as do Harvey's. Ordnance Survey also produce 1 in 50,000 scale maps. The maps that I use, I always get laminated maps, and that's for a very good reason. They get wet and they're more durable. And by durable, I mean that they can withstand some punishment. So a laminated map can also be marked up and written on. This is an OHP marker, permanent. So I'm going to put a grid reference on there. It's an emergency, SX 723157. It will come straight off when I get home, when I rub it down with a bit of alcohol. And I'm not referring to the 12-year-old single malt in the cabinet in the kitchen. I'm referring to the hand sanitizer that I'm carrying with me. It'll take that clean off and leave no mark at all. So let's have a wander up to the top of Hartwell. Looks like I might need some of those navigation skills to get home. Now, just as important as the map is the compass, if not more so. My preferred compass for walking and hiking is a straightforward silver marching compass type 54. This part we generally refer to as the base plate. It has 3 scales on the roamer. One for 1 in 25,000, one for 50,000, and one for 1 in 40,000. The arrows that move within inside this bezel here are the north arrows, and this arrow is the direction of travel arrow. And on the outer rotating bezel, the compass has 360 degrees marked. And finally, there's a needle. That's a magnetic needle that points north. Now, I'd like to say that it always points north, but they don't always. Generally speaking, the needle will point to north. However, there are occasions when a compass can reverse polarity. It doesn't happen very often, and the needle is actually pointed in the opposite direction. And on one occasion, it was just kind of vaguely pointing in any direction. It had become demagnetized. It's quite rare for it to happen, but I've dealt with a lot of compasses in my lifetime. And if you send them back to silver, if it's a silver compass, they will remagnetize it for you. And another problem that can occur with compasses is an air bubble. This is trapped air. I can't do anything about that. I can't get it out. If it's within so many years of its life, silver will replace or fix it free of charge. And they will ask you for a couple of letters off the back of the base plate here, which denote the year of manufacture. And if it's within that, I think it's within 5 years, they'll certainly repair it for you. There are 2 other letters on the back of the base plate as well. And on this one, it says MN, Magnetic North. There are 3 different compass needle weightings. This is magnetic north for use in the northern hemisphere. There's a magnetic south, MS, and one that is intended for equatorial use. So if I'm stood in the southern hemisphere and I've got a compass that's weighted for the northern hemisphere, effectively north is down there. It's not over there, so the needle's trying to bury itself. So they're magnetized for different regions in different ways. However, if you're in the UK and you're purchasing a compass from a reputable outdoor stockist, it will be a magnetic north compass. You don't need to check that. Other compasses you may come across are the Ranger type silver compass. And so this one has a mirror for sighting with. This helps me to take a more accurate bearing. This also has a clinometer, so if I rotate this, if you watch it, there's a little arrow that's just here and it's going to sink down. And that's for measuring the gradient of hills with. And last, but by no means least, is my sighting compass. I absolutely love this. It looks like a Type 54 standard base plate compass from the outside, but it actually has an additional sighting element to it here, and that's given me a very accurate reading in the direction in which that's looking. But for today, I'm just going to use the standard silver marching compass with a standard base plate, my favourite compass. Now, I mentioned that our compass has a needle on it that points to north. It's magnetised, so it is going to point to magnetic north. However, magnetic north is not necessarily at the true point at the top of the Earth, as my lunch will now demonstrate. So what we actually have is true north, and true north is where lines of longitude meet. There we go, we've got latitude and longitude on our little globe. But lines of longitude and latitude don't really live on an Ordnance Survey map. They can be found in smaller data on the map, but in all practicality we don't really use them to navigate on an Ordnance Survey map, and nor do we use true north. So if I now represent the United Kingdom on my lunch, there we go. The Ordnance Survey has effectively laid a grid. 500 kilometre squares, which are called the military grid, and within that they're broken down into smaller 100 kilometre squares, which are the Ordnance Survey grid. And from that we can derive our position on an Ordnance Survey map using these grid lines as our reference point. But their north depends where you are on that map. And they may not necessarily line up with true north. So as I said, we don't use true north when we're navigating with Ordnance Survey. We use grid north. But how does that fit in with our compass? Well, the compass, as I said, points towards magnetic north, and I'm going to represent magnetic north with this button. And I'll stick a corresponding one down here for the magnetic South Pole. So depending where you are on the globe, these different norths may line up or they may not line up. If I was sailing my ship, for example, here, true north would be there on my chart, whereas magnetic north would be over there. And there is a variation between the two, and very rarely will all three of these ever line up. However, I've represented magnetic north by using this sort of general area of the flower. And that's because magnetic north, the magnetic poles, are continuously moving. And they move at a predictable rate. And that rate of change is called secular change. And secular change is predictable. So provided you know when a map was printed and you have the information on that map from the legend, you can calculate the difference between where your compass is going to point and your map is pointing and allow a variation or declination between the two. That's an adjustment we can make. So here we go. Within the legend of the map, it's going to tell me information about the north points. We've got magnetic north, grid north, and true north represented as a diagram here. And the information on how to calculate the difference is contained here. And it'll tell me on the map the date that the map was printed and the date for when this was valid and how to apply the change incrementally for each year. Now, when I was a youngster, my dad taught me how to navigate and apply these variations to the map and the compass. The variation then, or declination as its proper name is, was 7.5 degrees. But for here today, because of that secular change, on Dartmoor, the change is as close to as nothing as makes no odds. So happy days, I don't have to apply anything at all. And you might very well ask, what's the point of all that? Well, the point is that if I know where north is, I can rotate this map, I can orientate it in a direction so that it relates to the landscape. I can then transfer bearings from my compass on things that I see on the landscape back to the map, and from things on the map that I want to achieve or walk to my compass to point me in the right direction. And doing that, setting a map, is a very simple affair to achieve. So first of all, I want to line up all the north arrows on my compass. So I'm going to line up north, the north arrows on the compass, with the direction of travel arrow. And as you can see, I've got north lined up with the direction of travel arrow, and I'm going to place it onto the map. And now I'm going to align the compass with these blue grid lines that run from the top to the bottom of my map. So now that I have them lined up, the only thing that isn't lined up is the magnetic needle. So if I rotate myself, the compass and the map all together, and face in the direction until all the arrows line up, you can see now that the magnetic needle is lined up with everything else. The map is orientated in a way that I can relate to the landscape. And so from here I can see there's a place called North Essery Tor with a television mast, and I'm stood here at Hart Tor. So if I look in this direction now, I should be able to see North Essery Tor. And provided I keep the map set in this manner, I should be able to look around me at the landscape and relate to all of those features surrounding me. And you'll find at the bottom of an Ordnance Survey map the scale of the map along with measurements in kilometres, feet and miles. Now, I mentioned the Roma scale on the edge of the compass, and for the 1 in 25,000 scale, that's this one here, we can see that if I place it between two of the lines, you'll see that it goes up in increments. So it's actually 50 metres, 100, 150, 200, all the way to 1 kilometre. So we can actually measure distance using the Roma scale. So for example, if we're stood at this point on this track and we want to get to this point where the road crosses this spring or this stream, we can place the edge of our compass against there with using the correct scale, of course, and we can measure that, and we can see it's approximately 600 metres. So how can I make the map and the compass work for me to determine my position? So there's certainly techniques like triangulation or resection, transferred position lines, and various other methodologies, which of course doesn't exclude pulling your GPS or phone out to find out where you are. But for the purposes of a simple video, I'm going to show you one technique so that you can fix your position if you have a rough idea where you are. And right now I know that I'm somewhere along the banks of the Hart Tor Brook. I just don't know exactly where. But I can see off in the distance here, Hart Tor itself. So I'm going to take my compass and I'm going to point it directly at the point that I want to take my bearing on. And that, in this case, is Hart Tor. And now I'm going to rotate this bezel on my compass until the north arrows on the compass line up with the magnetic needle. And I keep the direction of travel pointing at the point I'm trying to take the bearing from. And this is telling me that Hart Tor bears from me 340, that's 350 there, so it's 346 degrees from my location. Now, keeping the direction of travel arrow pointing in the same direction, because this is relative from me to the point that I'm looking at, if I now place the compass on top of the map and I rotate the compass, not the bezel, just the compass, until the north arrows on the compass, that's these ones, not the magnetic arrow, forget the magnetic arrow at this point. Magnetic lives on the compass when you're looking at things out in the open. It doesn't live on a map. These are the ones I'm interested in here, and I want to line them up with the lines on the map. We then slide the compass over the point that we've taken the bearing from, bearing in mind the direction of travel is pointing in the same direction, and follow that line back to the Hart Tor Brook, where I know I'm stood somewhere on it, and now I know I'm at this point here on the Hart Tor Brook. So we've actually fixed our position. Now I'm sat on a place called Hart Tor, and I want to travel to the bottom of this stone row here where it meets the Meavy River. Visibility's looking a bit poor, and I want to travel on a compass bearing to that point. I'm going to place the edge of the compass between Hart Tor, where I'm stood, and the destination where I want to go to. I'm going to line the two up. So there's the destination point, there's my starting point, and they're lined up now. So I rotate the bezel on the compass until the north arrow on the compass and the lines on the compass line up with these blue lines. They're all lined up there, and that is my direction of travel from Hart Tor to the stone row where it meets the Meavy River. And I'm going to physically move my body and turn around until the magnetic needle falls between the compass north needles there. And that now gives me my direction of travel. I'm not just going to travel in that direction without taking account of what I pass on the way. So let's tick off points as we go. So in terms of ticking off features, we've got the stone row marked. There are cairns marked on here as well, so we should see something there. And they should happen before I hit that river. And fantastic. This is a Bronze Age burial cairn. We know we're heading in the right direction. We've ticked that one off. And so lining up our bearing again. And we can also tick off a double stone row. It's starting to get dark out here now. The car lights are on, I can see them in the distance. And this is the one time I've been out making a video and I'm not worried that it's going to get dark. Because if I'm making a navigation video and I'm worried that it's going to get dark, then I'm probably on the wrong subject matter. And as promised, at the base of the stone row where the River Meavy cuts through here. Come on then, onwards and upwards. Good girl. So the grid lines on an Ordnance survey map, 1 in 25,000 scale, are 4 centimetres apart. And remember that 1 millimetre on that map represents 25 metres on the ground. In terms of 25 metres, that's usually about the length of the average swimming pool, isn't it? But we're not going to get very far if we keep measuring 25 metres in the outdoors. We might be walking 25 miles. So a more useful unit of measurement is probably the 100 metres. And how do we gauge 100 metres? Think football pitch, from one goal to the other. Well, I can look off in the distance and sort of imagine where a football field might be, but it isn't particularly helpful, particularly at night, because I won't be able to see anything. So I need to be able to measure that. And we can do that by pacing. And this is an activity during lockdown while you're taking your exercise. You can undertake. Go to a standard football field and measure the amount of paces on average. Do it 3, 4, 5 times. It takes you to walk from one end to the other. And by pace, it's a double pace. On this occasion, I'm going to measure with my right foot. And 1, and 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now I know through years of practice and experience of pacing that I perform 63 double paces to the 100 metres. That will vary depending on terrain, whether going uphill, downhill and technical terrain, but you will get a feel for it and you will be able to adjust. But it does take practice. So I mentioned earlier that this compass has 3 scales on it, 3 roamers, and there's one for 1 in 25,000, one for 1 in 50,000 and one for 1 in 40,000. And the one I want to focus on is the 1 in 25,000 scale, which is the scale of this map. So each one of these increments here, the tiny increments of 50 metres, 100 metres, 200 metres, 400, 600, all the way up to 1 kilometre here. So if I measure between this wall here and this wall here, using the scale on my compass, I can see it's 200 metres. So now it's getting dark and I want to know where I'm going at every step of the way. So I'm going to pace that 200 metres. So this time I'm going to pace 100 metres and I'm going to put a thumb or a finger into the belt of my rucksack. And when I get to 200 metres, I can put a second finger into the belt of my rucksack. Or if it was 300 metres, 400 metres, fingers can go into the belt of my rucksack. Alternatively, many people like to pick up small pebbles, and they might pick up, say, a half a dozen, and they'll transfer one from one pocket to the next pocket. Whatever floats your boat, really. I'm not an advocate for anything in particular, just an advocate for what suits me, for what I'm doing, in the places where I go, with the stuff that I've got. So, let's pace our 200 metres, shall we? And 4, and 5, and 9, and 10, 11, 61, 62, 63. Right, that's the first 100 metres. 61, 62, 63. So I should be at the wall now. And there we have it. So yeah, a couple of paces out, as you can see. Petra's got her flashing light on now, so I can tell where she is, but I know exactly where I am in relation to my map at this moment in time. So what was the point of all that pacing about then? Well, if we know where we started on the map, and we know what direction we were travelling in from our compass, and we know how far we've travelled, that means at any one point we can have an approximation of where we are now. But pacing isn't the last word in distance travelled. On average, I think on rough terrain, I probably only walk at about 4 kilometres per hour. So if I'm travelling on a bearing for 1 hour, I've probably covered 4 kilometres. So right now I'm at a place called Crambertor on that point, and I want to walk to this OS trig point over here at a spot height of 445 metres. And I'm going to measure that with a Romer scale on my compass, and it's telling me that it's 850 metres. So at 4 kilometres an hour, 1 kilometre would take me 15 minutes. 850 metres should take me less than that. So I'm going to estimate about 12 minutes to get there. That's just rough calculation off the top of my head. Any longer than 15 minutes and I've probably missed the point. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bearing, as we did before, off the map, between the 2 points, and I'll line up the north arrows on the compass. Now I've got a bearing to walk on, I'm going to time myself. So if I've been walking for 6 minutes, I know I'm only halfway there. If I've walked the 12 minutes, I'm probably there. Let's time our journey and walk on a compass bearing. There's our trig point. 12 minutes and 9 seconds. 12 minutes and 9 seconds. So that wasn't a bad estimation at all. It's almost as though I've done that before. So all of these navigation skills need to be practiced, but after a while, with a certain amount of practice, some things will become intuitive. You'll realise how fast you're travelling and how long it will take you to get to particular points. What I would say is trying to hit a trig point in restricted visibility or at night over a 900 metre stretch like that, you'd be lucky to hit it. Because you are going to have some deviation in the direction in which you're walking. And some people find it difficult to walk on a compass bearing. You know, I've got friends who could knit a cow's arse with a banjo, let alone a trig point at 900 metres. So look out for catching features, break the segment up into smaller parcels, look for elements to tick off, and other things that may tell you that you're going astray are the fact that this is at the highest point. I pointed out that it's at a spot height. So if I started walking downhill in one direction or downhill in the other direction, then I know I'm not really going in the right direction. Here we are at 445 metres at this trig point here. And I want to navigate my way to this point here, which is marked BS, boundary stone, I hasten to add. And the boundary stone, by the looks of things, is just the other side of this linear feature here, this black line, which from local knowledge I know is a wall. And you can actually use the magnifying glass on your compass to enhance the features that are there. What happens if my bearing is slightly off, or I walk slightly off? If I walk in this direction, I'll miss the boundary stone, and I won't know that I've missed it. I won't know which part of the wall I'm on. But rather than run the risk of missing it, why don't I just aim off for somewhere to one side of it, so that I can be sure that I know that I've landed on this side. So if I take a bearing from the trig point and aim off just south of the boundary stone, I know I've got a short walk uphill and then I'll meet it, rather than run the risk of missing it completely. This skill is called aiming off. And I can see that there's a track running here. So that's what we call a catching feature. So as I walk, as I hit that track, I know I've gone far enough. I can also measure the distance and have a rough estimation of how long that's going to take me. And that's my direction we're going to walk in, except I'll walk around the big puddle. The trig points were put here by the Ordnance Survey when mapping the area. They're a set pattern and design. There aren't too many on Dartmoor, but you find them all over the countryside, normally on high points and spot heights. Anyway, I don't want to lose focus. Back to my compass. Come on, Petra, onwards and upwards. Oh, that's great. She can leap it. I just get wet feet. Walking on the bearing, I've aimed off south of the boundary stone I want to find. And I've got this catching feature in front of me now, a track. So there's no boundary stone here. That wasn't the intention, but what I do know is that I can turn left now, and as predicted we're on a slight downward gradient downhill from the boundary stone, and it should be just up here by about 200 metres behind a wall. Let's go see if we can find it. Come on in, Petra. Onwards and upwards. There we go. And if you remember from the map, there was a kinkhorn bend in that wall. Here it is. And you may or may not notice that the boundary stone's on the wrong side of the wall. We said it was on the other side of the wall, didn't we? That's because that's not it. That's the boundary stone there. Good girl. Sit. Clever girl. Clever girl. Well, thank you for watching so far, folks. As I said, a lot of these skills are things you really need to practice if you've not done them before, in a place of safety, somewhere that you're familiar with. I'll be honest with you, this wasn't the easiest of videos to put together, so I hope it comes out okay. And there are reasons for that, because really these are practical skills that you need to practice in reality and do time and time again. And you can do that on the hill with somebody who's experienced with you, guiding and mentoring, or you can go to a safe area and expand on your skills, expand that envelope of knowledge and capability as you go along. What I do know is that I've enjoyed walking for a couple of days and for a night with Petra to put this together, and I hope you have enjoyed it. If you do enjoy what we've done with the video, perhaps you might have a look at one or two of our other videos as well. And what would really be the icing on the cake is if you subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate followers, and I'd be really flattered if you wanted to follow our progress. Thank you ever so much, folks. We're going to head for home now, so stay safe, look after one another, and we'll see you all very soon. Come on in, Petra, onwards and upwards. Good girl. Come on in.